chance here. Alex Hunter.
We've arrived, guys.
Good match, Alex Hunter.
Does FIFA's new Frostbite engine leave us cold? Is new story-based mode The Journey a diversion worth taking? And, is there another football game we can endlessly compare this to? Like Pep versus Mourinho? Or is there a better way to explain each game's strengths? Well, I'm Dan Dawkins, Global EIC of GamesRadar. I'm joined today by our resident sports expert, Ben Wilson. We're going to go in there two-footed and address straight away the Frostbite engine. What's the big deal?
The big deal is lighting, would you believe? I know EA didn't say that in their kind of pre-release build-up play, as it were. But it doesn't actually change much in terms of the feel of the game. The feel of the game is still very much like FIFA 16. That won't be for everyone's tastes. There's a few changes in there which we'll go on to in a minute. But yeah, lighting-wise, the game looks phenomenal. I'd rank it up there now with NBA 2K17 and MLB The Show as the best-looking sports games on PS4 and Xbox One. Whether that's enough to convince people to buy it is a different matter entirely.
So me, with my normal eyes, do you think the biggest takeaway would be the lighting looks better?
Yeah, I mean, you're a big Man United fan, and if you look at these pictures of Old Trafford, you know, the players coming out of Old Trafford, it really is like either being there or watching it on TV. It does, you know, insane things, like you can sort of see individual paths of light emanating from the floodlights. And I know that sounds like such a ridiculously superficial thing to notice, but it really does make a difference to the game's atmosphere. And when you couple that in with a lot of the new sort of intangible things they've added this year, I think it makes for a really long-lasting, enjoyable experience.
Now, what are the other key changes that I might notice this year?
So the key changes to gameplay, as I say, the feel of the game is very much like 16. There's a touch more physicality in terms of forward play. So if you've got like an Olivier Giroud, or in your case with United and Ibrahimovic, they are that little bit more adept at holding the ball up. In terms of like build-up play, it's still really focused on fast wing play, trick stick dribbling, which, you know, is probably one for me like a weakness. A lot of people like that, and just overall, it's surprisingly similar to 2016. The one thing that really has changed is the set pieces. So you've now got throw-ins, free kicks, penalties and corners are all markedly different. Throw-ins, you can move up and down the touchline before you throw the ball in, which changes your angle and finally fixes them. I think they've been broken for a number of years now. Free kicks, you can move around to adjust your run-up angle before taking one, and you can also hit them with the outside of your boot, Roberto Carlos style. That's a new feature. Corners, you have an aiming reticule, and you can either hold down the button for a flat trajectory, or you can tap the button for a loop trajectory. The aiming reticle in two-player obviously feels a little bit cheaty, but in single-player does give you that kind of sense that you're handling a pro and can accurately put the ball where you want it to go. And penalties, to me, I would say are broken. They work in a similar style to free kicks, where you can adjust your run-up angle, but the way they work now is after you've pressed the left stick to just define your initial run-up angle, you then have to hold down the shoot button and make really tiny incremental nudges on the left stick to change direction, none of which you can see represented on screen unless you turn the the help guides on. Right. And it just feels like convoluted. I know a lot of people will complain about the penalties in the past, but I think they've made it overly difficult now just to hit a penalty in the top corner, and that is one thing I would say that needs to be patched, and soon.
So overall, do you think they've made sufficient gameplay changes to address a lot of the critique from last year?
Yes, I think one of the key things for me last year was central defenders and defensive midfielders were overpowered in terms of kind of nipping forward and taking the ball away from your, let's say, your centre forward. So you couldn't really make any kind of focused build-up play through the middle. Everything was focused on the flanks. Everything was focused on sort of crosses into the box. Now you really can, especially if you've got like a forward player, as I say, like Ibrahimovic or Giroud, now you really can hold the ball up properly. They've increased physicality, and they've sort of not downgraded central defenders and defensive midfielders. They've just made them that little bit less super keen to snap onto every pass as soon as you deliver it.
Now, obviously, the big mode, which does in itself sound like a press release for a 1970s prog band, The Journey, helmed by Rupert Moonweed, or whatever his name is. How does that play out? I understand this is like a BioWare-style decision pathway, multi-choice act or story. Can you describe it to me and how it works?
It's a pleasant surprise. When we first mentioned it on the site a few months back, I was quite down on it. I described the voice acting as a little bit EastEnders. I was amazed. It's about 15 hours long, and there's going to be some spoilers in here, so you might want to fast forward.
Whoa, spoilers alert!
1 minute if you need to. So you start off, you choose your side. You choose one of 20 Premier League sides. It lasts a season. You start off the season in a close, friendship with you're called Alex Hunter. Your mate is called.
You
Gareth
can only
Warner.
play as one guy.
You can only play as Alex Hunter.
Yeah.
There's no customization or anything like that. His mate is called Gareth Warner, and over that season, you go from, without spoiling it too much, you go from being close friends to rivalries. He ends up signing for a rival club, and you can see what this all builds towards without giving too much away. And at one point, you get to choose to go out on loan. You can choose to go out to Villa, Newcastle, or Norwich in the Championship. And it does give a reasonable sense of what it's like to be a pro footballer, surprisingly so, actually. Reece Oxford was brought in from West Ham to give some consultancy thoughts on what it's like to be a footballer breaking through at 17, and you can really see that in the game. There's cameo appearances from Angel Di Maria and Harry Kane and Marco Reus, and they're reasonably well handled. They don't kind of make it feel ridiculous, and the dialogue is actually surprisingly good. The relationship between Hunter and Walker is believable, and when you go to things like train. So I'm playing as Palace. I'm a massive Palace fan. Again, you can see from these videos. When you go to training for the first time, you line up alongside Scott Dan and Christian Benteke, or when you're walking through the tunnel and you bump into Alan Pardew, you do a little kind of internal dig. No football game has put you in that position of lining up alongside your heroes, as it were. It's nicely handled. It's only about 15 hours long. There's no grind to it. It's reasonably fast paced. I think it's going to pleasantly surprise people.
Can you give me a quick example of the kind of decision you might have to make in the game without too many spoilers? And this is a Mass Effect joke for everyone. Which of the 3 light beams do you walk into at the end?
So you get 3 dialogue choices in any situation. There's a cool response, there's a fiery response, or there's an intermediate balanced response. Okay. And so in an aftermatch, if in an aftermatch press conference you've scored, the interviewer might ask what you thought of the assist, and the fiery response might say, "I don't care, I did it all myself." The cool response would be to sort of give the credit, all the credit to the assister, and the balanced response might be to say, "Oh, it's a team game, it doesn't matter who scores, etc." Let's say you give a series of fiery responses, you might upset your manager, so you're more likely to be dropped, but also you'll increase your Twitter followers. That's the thing on this. It's got a virtual Twitter.
Oh, amazing.
And the more Twitter followers you get, the more endorsements you can get. So your first endorsement at 200,000 followers is you get to choose a pair of Adidas boots. So it's got these little touches. Like I say, it's that at one point you get your own Ultimate Team card. It's a little bit meta, but again quite cleverly handled. And when you complete the mode, again, bit of a spoiler here, you actually get Alex Hunter as an Ultimate Team card unlock that joins your team, your Ultimate Team permanently. So that's quite a nice little reward.
And is the stats attached to him affected by the way you'd played the game, or is it just the generic "here's who he is"?
At the end of the mode, so the stats within the journey mode, the stats, all your training, all your matches, everything you do affect his stats, and you can at certain points you can do free training and choose which stats you want to build up. At the end of the mode, I believe the Ultimate Team card is generic in the sense that it's always 75 overall. Specific numbers for shooting, passing. I don't think that changes depending on your performance in the mode itself.
Okay, well, we're approaching the final whistle and thankfully the end of my football cliches, Ben. So any other cool stuff we should be looking out for?
I think FIFA does a really good job. Again, I'm a big fan of a baseball game called MLB The Show, of adding in those small details that you don't even really notice. And I'm talking about referees in the English league have their real names. There's a referee called Darren Deadman who half our audience won't even have heard of, but he's in the game. His name's in the game. You get on the final whistle, you get the referee will give a player who's scored a hat-trick the match ball. You get the tannoy announcer in the stadium will reveal the man of the match 5 minutes from the end of the game. You hear it in the background. Loads of these little things that FIFA's almost taken for granted sometimes. I got the game a fortnight before it came out, and it already had all the transfers in there, all the players in there. There's Man United, youth prospects in there who I've never heard of, who have their real faces in the game. They just got a
not Timmy Fosu-Mensah.
I think Fosu-Mensah is in there actually.
Oh, is he? I thought his face was bad. He was saying. Anyway, I digress, Ben.
But yeah, I just think they're getting really good EA Canada on. on moving away from the back of the box gimmicks and the journey aside, but I don't think the journey is a gimmick. I think the journey is very playable and enjoyable, and putting in those things that you don't necessarily notice until you've played it for sort of 20, 30, 40 hours.
Well, I guess the final judgment then is people will want to know whether it's better than PES, which I guess you can try to answer. I guess I'm more interested in who is each game for, and is there space for two of them in your life?
There's definitely space for two of them. I think PES is for the fan who has grown fed up with FIFA the last 3 or 4 years. I think that it's fair to say that FIFA hasn't changed greatly since the move to current gen, and I think I respect the fact that there are a number of people out there who feel that that kind of wing play, trick stick necessitating gameplay isn't for them, and I definitely recommend PES as the one to go for this year. I think in terms of FIFA, the thing it does really well is just that complete package of, if you want, for me as a Palace fan, if you want to hear the fans chanting Alan Pardew's name, you want Pardew on the touchline, you want to play at Selhurst.
Who wouldn't?
That sort of completionist element is still going to appeal to that fan more. And maybe that's a comment on the superficiality of football in general, that people want it to look like real life.
It's part of the theatre of football. Is the Pardew dance in there, by the way?
Sadly not. The Pardew dance isn't in there. But the managers, I mean, they have some robotic movements, but I played a match last night as United against City, and I'm not even a fan of either of those clubs, but seeing Guardiola and Mourinho line up against each other as this evening game, like I say, beautifully lit stadium, it really, really felt like it had that big match atmosphere, and having the managers in there sort of completed the puzzle, as it were. So I think that the purist game will always be PES, and certainly this year PES is incredible this year. But for those wanting the complete package with elements like Ultimate Team, with elements like Career Mode, there's so much in FIFA this year, and it's probably time that we stop taking that for granted, because I've had the game a week and I've probably played about 40 hours into it, and you're talking, that's like Mass Effect or Skyrim levels of gameplay in terms of time. Whichever football game you plump for this year, I think you're going to get serious value for money.
Well, thanks very much, Ben. Please subscribe to the GR channel for more videos coming up on FIFA 17 and all the football titles. And stay tuned to GR, the website, for more from Ben Wilson, our sports expert.